America's center of power changed, and with it, the dynamics of the political landscape. The consequences will reverberate locally, in Florida, on Capitol Hill, and on the global stage. Voters demanded change on the issues that mattered most: the economy, immigration, and social issues. Now, News4JAX goes beyond the headlines with political analysts who provide unique context and perspective. Experts focused on the issues making headlines. This is Politics and Power.
The Trump administration continues its promise of a mass deportation of illegal immigrants. The problem is that the administration is not only going after the criminal element it said it would target. Look at the headlines on almost a daily basis. There are documented cases of people with U.S. passports being arrested by immigration officials, and they had no criminal background. Native Americans from the Navajo Nation arrested, others from Puerto Rico. People who were in the United States lawfully and did not pose threats, did not pose a risk to public safety, caught up in the sweeps by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents. The dragnets continue to target immigrant and minority communities. Those chilling headlines mentioned indicate that many of the raids are seemingly indiscriminate. You have people who are permanent residents of the United States who have been put in detention and deported. Tourists, people who wanted to visit the U.S., literally turned away. Welcome to Politics and Power. I'm Bruce Hamilton. Joining me, Juan Carlos Gomez. He's been defending the rights of individuals in immigration matters for more than 30 years. Director of the Carlos A. Costa Immigration Human Rights Clinic. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So these raids are continuing at a dizzying pace. And as I mentioned, people who are here lawfully, people with no criminal backgrounds, tourists are being detained, civil rights are being violated. The administration cites flimsy evidence, tattoos, deleted photos on cell phones, and pro-Hamas flyers. It almost seems, Juan Carlos, that the administration throws immigrant rights out the window.
Well, because it's the scariest part is that we have now regressed to thinking that a law from 1798 is from the Adams administration is a way to avoid the laws that we do have. The Immigration and Nationality Act clearly prescribes how to process a person who is here without status. And the problem that we face is that you see a circumvention of the law from those who are supposed to enforce the laws. And I always tell people that we must worry as a republic, as a country, when law enforcement is focusing on numbers rather than on strategic uses of the law to protect us. And you made the point that others other than dangerous individuals are being targeted. And the problem is that you have mass detentions in facilities that do not have the capacity. You have limited control over the process, and we truly are violating here due process rights. If you think of the people who were sent, the men who were sent to El Salvador, that was not a deportation. That was imprisonment, and that is imprisonment without a trial. If you deport someone, you send them abroad. You don't pay $6 million to a government that is known for violating human rights to jail people in a maximum security prison without a trial, without some kind of procedure. And we're in danger as a country if we allow this to happen. Hopefully, the judicial branch, the Article 3 courts, will stand up to these violations of our Constitution, to these violations of the Immigration and Nationality Act, and understand that if you think of an attempt, for example, you have Secretary Rubio trying to classify all immigration decisions as a foreign policy, so as to try to avoid some of the procedures that are required under the Administrative Procedures Act, which is the law that we have followed since 1946, understanding that normally the sort of it ebbs and flows, if you will, on how agencies are supposed to work it's been decades of trying to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense in enforcing laws. But here we're just throwing out the laws, jailing individuals. And the thing is that what we as American citizens need to be worried about is that machines like this have to be restrained. If you think of lawsuits that were filed against the Obama and the Biden administration because of the accusations, whether it was related to DACA or related to the parole in place program that was challenged in last year by certain attorneys general, the issue is they accuse these administrations of excessive use of executive power, of law, of taking action that exceeded their authority. Here we go, and they're doing worse. They are imprisoning people, and think of the number of individuals with tattoos. Think of the number of individuals who are accused on a regular basis by law enforcement, by states' attorneys. And the issue is we have to think about what process we are willing to abdicate, or that we're willing to just give up. What protections are we going to give up? It does not make sense for us to do this. We need to rein in this excessive use of power. This is not correct.
Well, let me pick up on something you just said. Neda Gupta, who's the policy director of the American Immigration Council, put it this way. He says, under the Trump administration, what we're seeing is, yes, allegations using flimsy evidence, which is what you just talked about, paired with no meaningful opportunity to refute that evidence in any kind of proceeding before any kind of decision maker. That's really what makes this difference. Are immigration attorneys off balance and becoming disoriented because of the quickening pace and because of all of this that's going on?
I'll give you a scenario. I have a severely mentally ill gentleman who has legal problems. They moved him from our state legal system, from our state prison, to Jacksonville, to Baker County. Then they moved. The hearings were at the Chrome Detention Center by video. Now they moved him to Louisiana, and the thing is that it's insane to think that a case of a severely mentally ill man who needs stability, who needs structure, who has pro bono counsel, and the issue is the hearing couldn't take place. The immigration court didn't even know that he had been moved. The attorney for the government didn't know that he had been moved. And the thing is that you have this churning of chaos to prevent people from being able to access justice. And if there's something that we must be in this country is access to justice.
All right, so the administration has its own arguments. They say when immigrant rights are brought to the forefront, Trump administrations push back against critics who raise concerns about immigrants' legal rights. In fact, the border czar, Tom Homan, has this stock answer. He says, due process, what was Laken Riley's due process? That's what he said on ABC. Riley was the nursing student who was killed by an undocumented immigrant from Venezuela. And Homan went on, he says,
that's what our Constitution is about.
That were killed and raped by members of Tren de Aragua. What was their due process? How do you respond to that?
But let's break that down. Let's talk about this horrifying gang, Tren de Aragua. In our country, you cannot use the civil system, the administrative system, to circumvent the criminal justice system. When we as a country will sit through trials when the evidence is there, and we will still give this person their day in court. And the thing is that this lynching type mentality is unacceptable. It is un-American. Because the thing is, think about it. You can't think of projects like Innocence Project. Think of the opportunity to have access to counsel. It has been shown statistically the significant difference that it makes to have access to counsel. When a crime is committed, it must be punished. Yes, the person must be punished, but you cannot be labeled. And think about it. Think of the logic of saying you identify Tren de Aragua with Venezuelans. There are 607,000 individuals, and we know that the Venezuelan president is an illegitimate president. He stole that election. We know that. And yet, tell me that the 190 who were returned, do you think that deal was really made that weekend? Do you really believe that there are 607,000 members of Tren de Aragua? No. There are victims of this government, of the Maduro government, of the Chavez government before Maduro. You have victims in other countries. And the thing is, though, that you can't label everyone with the stain of one small group. I have no problem if we can, under our laws, identify people who are gang members. Let's put them through the process. We have been doing it for decades, as long as we've had immigration courts. And before then, we also had law enforcement. But we have a process. You cannot just send someone away to a prison. And think about it. If you're holding someone in the practice in El Salvador, in 2023, the legislative branch in El Salvador authorized trials of up to 900 persons at a time. Is that a trial? That's not a trial, that's a farce. We know that the system in El Salvador is in no way comparable to our system. And yet we're paying to imprison someone, as has been said by the Salvadoran government. They will be held for a year. Is that not a prison sentence? And then their custody will be reviewed. How is that a deportation? A deportation is I removed you. A removal is I removed you from the United States to another country. Not that I imprisoned and not that I am paying.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's also illegal to send somebody from the United States to a foreign prison system. And if I remember, when this whole issue of mass deportations first came up and you and I first talked, you brought up the point that it's a fact that those who go to immigration court already face a lower standard of due process. And now, Juan, we have individuals who are being targeted by immigration officials because of their political opinions or taking part in political activities. Have you ever seen anything like this?
I have, when I've seen videos of state security in Cuba taking dissidents. And we have the First Amendment. I have friends who politically disagree with me, but I respect their right to express their views as they respect my right to express mine. And yet I can tell you that I very much respect my friends who have different views.
You've seen it in Cuba, but you haven't seen it here in the United States.
Well, did you see how they picked up the young doctoral student at Tufts? And now the problem is that you can't process individuals. And notice how there's a certain amount of forum shopping going on, because rather than hold the person in either the First Circuit or the Second Circuit, you take the person to Louisiana. And how is that correct? The person was detained where they were detained. Show the evidence before an adjudicator, before a judge, an immigration judge, but show that this person has truly violated. This concept that because their presence in the U.S. is not in the interest of the U.S., that is extraordinarily vague and dangerous and completely inconsistent with what we in the 21st century would identify as fairness.
Is this a student who was literally just picked up on the street and their
Yes.
family couldn't find them for weeks?
With masks.
You know, I mean, ICE basically said, well, we don't know where she is, right?
Yes. Think about it. That's dangerous, because always think of the problem of if we don't stand up for those people who we disagree with necessarily, aren't we endangering our own freedom? How is this consistent with those of us, with the views of those of us who believe in the Constitution? It is dangerous to allow an executive official, and the word czar always scares me. Czar simply means Caesar. And we're not, we're not that. We're not a czarist country. We're not. The thing is that we have individuals functioning outside the laws with the power of the executive branch, and that is extraordinarily dangerous.
We have an
And
executive branch that doesn't want to recognize that there are two other branches of government.
well, those two other branches of government need to speak up. This is neither the Republican or Democratic Party. I don't know what this is, but this is not. This cannot be acceptable.
So let's take this one step further. You have students being prohibited from protesting. I'm talking peaceful protests. You have Columbia University bending to the president's will, a major law firm acquiescing and agreeing to pay Donald Trump $40 million just to assuage him. Where is the line drawn?
Because of the power of money, because universities, because law firms are dependent on the federal dollar. Is this not a form of extortion? Isn't it? Like, I will take your money. I will your firm will not be able to do business with the federal government. Think of especially law firms that are dependent on this. Think of universities who are so dependent. The image you've just shown reminds me of a conversation I recently had with a young person who thought that this was almost like a high school sort of athletic thing where this person was like, yeah. And I said, we're talking about human beings. We're not talking about numbers and we're not talking about files. We're talking about human beings. This isn't, I wear a t-shirt because I support one team or another. This is our very existence as a republic. If you can avoid the courts, if you can avoid our laws that have been followed by both parties, and we have to remember that. We have to remember that there have been limits placed on the executive of both parties by the courts and by Congress. But we need individuals who will stand up to the excesses, to the excess use of power, because if we don't, we are doomed.
There's an article in The Independent. It cited an incident involving an unnamed French researcher who was detained because of texts that person sent. It cited this response from the French Minister of Higher Education and Research, Philippe Baptiste, who said, "Freedom of opinion, free research, and academic freedom are values that we will continue to proudly uphold. I will defend the right of all French researchers to be faithful to them while respecting the law." There's a story of a tourist from Wales coming to America for the self-described trip of a lifetime. 28-year-old spent 19 days in a processing center, no criminal record, led on a plane in chains. Why? There was an issue with her visa. A Canadian was detained while trying to get a work visa, legally going through the process, and the next in detention for no reason. List goes on. You've been fighting this immigration battle for 30 years. People have to be coming to you frightened and scared. What do you tell them?
Tell them the reality that they face. I remind people that this was what was represented. People knew that this was what was promised, and yet people dismissed it as, oh, it's rhetoric, don't worry about it. Well, now we have to worry about it, because now we see how the government is being handled. I use this example of, if you think of the tariffs that are threatened, if you think of a certain person who is supposedly advising the administration, and this person has, I'm talking about Mr. Musk, he has operations, his company has operations in a super plant in China, another plant in China, 5 other plants, according to the information that I've read, abroad. I assume that we're expecting those plants to be brought to the US to create jobs. I assume that tariffs will be imposed on those products also. I assume that the cuts will be imposed on the billions of dollars of contracts that this individual has. And the question is, for years, we have managed the concept of conflicts of interest. We have restrained power because that's what the very foundation of our Constitution is based on. The restriction, the checks and balances, the limited use of power. Our courts are courts of limited jurisdiction. You cannot just go in and do what you want. And the problem is that people are afraid. So if the powerful are afraid, if the large law firms, if the great universities are afraid, uh, who is going to protect the individuals? The individuals, if you will. I have a joke that my name is so common that there's 7 billion of me. And the thing is that, what about the anonymous Juan Gomez is the average person who is a nobody? And the thing is, though, that we are, if you look at the Constitution, if you look at the Fifth Amendment, if you look at the 14th Amendment, all persons have a right to due process. Liberty is a right, property is a right, and life is a right. Do you really believe that sending people just based on accusations to a country that, again, is running the operation that it's running, that mocks our courts, is this really a good idea? Think of when governments in other parts of the world are just allowed to do whatever they want. We need the courts to do what the Article 3 courts are supposed to do, and we need Congress to stand up and act like they really represent us, the people.
And it's curious to see what the Supreme Court's going to do. And the fact of the matter is that the legitimate media's hands are tied. I mean, yeah, you've got the media that represents the right, the media that represents the left, but you've got a good portion of the media that's being kept out of the loop and isn't being allowed to see what's really going on. Yet there are those who are asking the right questions and being chastised for it. Students coming back from spring break, students who want to, leave school and go see their families, afraid that they won't get back in, people going on vacation, afraid to have to come back through customs. They don't know what will confront them, and the majority have done nothing wrong.
Because the thing is that if you think of you mentioned the lower level of due process involved, and there is, for example, no due process involved when you're a non-citizen, when you're an alien coming to the U.S. Permanent residents have a different situation, but even then, you have the problem where you're at an inspection point and they ask you for your phone. And the question is, if you want to come in, they can deny your application if you do not open your phone. And the problem is, if you're a U.S. citizen, are they going to start asking us for whatever is on our phone too? Is this due? If it's the phone today, maybe I want to make sure that your home isn't doing, that you don't have some material. Think of the book banning movement. Think of the anti-immigration movement. Think of the many anti-anything movements that you have around. And these individuals, these movements have found a vehicle to power. And now we're facing the reality. I am truly shocked and very disappointed that instead of using the tools that we have to go after the individuals who are a danger to us, not the person who is working, not the person who is trying to contribute to our country. You have individuals who have been here an extraordinarily long period of time. Look at how temporary protected status has been handled. You're telling me that from before January 20th, when the Venezuelan TPS was extended, and then after January 20th, when a new administration comes in, that the conditions in Venezuela somehow changed? Are you telling me, if you look at the Haitian situation, you wonder why people's faces are covered? Is this think of what this is bad theater. This is Orwell. This is just dangerous. But going back to the Haitian situation, we recommend that U.S. citizens not travel to Haiti, yet canceled Haitian temporary protected status. And the answer is, what is the logic to that? And agencies are expected to follow reason, to show what evidence justifies their action, what facts justify their actions under the law. But in this movement of acting in an overwhelming way, in this chaos, it's this circus sort of allows all sorts of injustice to happen. And the truth is that they know that there aren't enough lawyers, and especially with administrative law that basically allows Homeland Security to move people around any which way, understanding that if you are picked up in Florida and you can be taken to another state away from where you have access to your family, away from where you have access to a lawyer, we're in danger. I'll give you a scenario. I have a situation where a pair of parents were disciplining their child, and the child called the police because they took her phone. Under the Lake and Riley law, just the accusation that they stole this child's phone, that they stole this young person's phone, that is enough to deny you access to bond. This is extraordinary, to think that a person who is being abused, you can't call the police because you're afraid that the police will take you. If you don't have status, or if you have some degree of status, or if you have a work permit, you're still vulnerable, and people are afraid. So how is that good for the safety of our communities? So that abusers are immune from prosecution, because is the abused going to call and face being removed? So we've just empowered abusers. We've just empowered chaos, rather than those of us who believe that in a family, if parents are telling their child, or that if someone is being abused by their spouse, that you should be able to call the police, that you should be able to get the backup of our local police, of our state police, and of our federal law enforcement. But we don't. We live in an environment of fear, a fear that is justified.
What you're pointing out is that we often ignore what is the real problem, and we have in this country. The immigration system is broken, which is something that you and I will be talking about in just a little bit. When Politics and Power continues, President Trump invokes a law from 1918 that's been employed only 3 times in history, and only in military conflict. Is it applicable? Is it lawful? He even claimed he didn't sign it, but it's in the Federal Registry with his signature. What, did he have a lapse in memory? That and more when Juan Gomez and I return with more on Politics and Power. Welcome back to Politics and Power. Bruce Hamilton, along with immigration attorney Juan Gomez. Trump administration defends the massive deportations it's carrying out. President invoked the Alien Enemies Act, an obscure 18th century law. I said 1918, I meant 1700s. 18th century law that's only been invoked 3 times in U.S. history, all during major military conflicts. Oh, he said at one time he didn't sign it, but the document has his signature. It's in the Federal Registry with his signature, no denying it. Well, he have a temporary lapse of memory, or did he mean he just didn't sign the original law? I don't get it.
I think that this is the problem. See, we have a problem with our immigration laws. There have been various attempts. There was an attempt, a bipartisan attempt in 2013 that included Senators Graham and Rubio in an effort to try to come up with some compromise. We have in 2007 the McCain-Kennedy bill that also failed. Every attempt that has been made to try to come up with some moderate, reasonable change. And I always make the point that, like, you have to always think that no one law can change, no one act of Congress can change everything. And in other words, cure everything. There's no cure all. But the thing is that we are dealing with numbers and with a system of immigration that is based on decades old problems and numbers. One of the things that happens is that you had a group of senators who would block efforts to reform immigration law. And if you go back to 1986, when President Reagan and Tip O'Neill and others attempted or to try to fix the problems of that period, it was understood that we had other problems going on in the world, but though there was an effort to also address the needs of our agricultural communities, there was an understanding that we needed to solve certain problems. Our labor markets do not jibe well with the system that we now have in place with the I-9 system. Those are those forms that we all fill out or complete when we start a job. It really doesn't make sense. If you think of the Federal Reserve and how the Federal Reserve Bank, or central bank, if you will, manages our monetary policy, manages interest, if you will, tries to get the economy to work to some degree, we don't have the same in immigration law. We do not adapt to the needs that we have as an economy, the needs that we have as businesses, the needs that we have as individuals and families. And so the thing becomes, until we are willing to behave like adults, and the example that I always used of absurdity is that there are grammatical errors in the Immigration and Nationality Act that are decades old and yet have not been corrected. And it's fascinating to see how we see the obvious. We see how we could tweak the laws that we have to make more sense, understanding that we need to go back and review it. When your car needs an oil change, you change the oil, you change the filter, you change other parts as you go along. You cannot just think that the administrative system is able to address all the problems that we have in the immigration system. We need Congress to act reasonably. We need Congress to come up with solutions that meet our needs. But we also need to understand that you and I believe we're speaking about this, about sort of the concept of the poor. If you go back in our history and you think of the 19th century, you had the problem in the Adams administration first in the 18th century. After the Washington administration, there's I argue, I always kind of semi-joke in a sort of foolish way that there's a reason there aren't too many monuments to John Adams and his administration, and things like the law that has been cited, the Alien Enemies Act, is an example of bad law. And the issue becomes that in the 19th century, you had this xenophobic, anti-Irish, anti-Catholic movement known as the Know Nothing Party. In the late 19th century, you had movements against against populations like Italians. You had that Know Nothing Party was extraordinarily anti-Irish. Think of the 1840s and 1850s. And then in the early 20th century, we had the racist laws of the 1920s, where we then restricted immigration from certain regions, namely the Western Hemisphere, namely the Southern Hemisphere. And the thing is that we fail to remember history. We fail to see how we must not make the mistakes of the past. And the thing is, I am definitely not open borders. I have never been open borders, but I am for the free flow of individuals under our laws. And our laws, though, have to make sense. And our laws are meant to facilitate life, not to restrict it. We're missing this point.
There are those who say that the president is simply violating the law, and he's trying to intimidate lawyers, intimidate judges, intimidate the courts. And Juan, nobody's going to argue that the criminal element needs to be dealt with. That was what President Trump originally put forth. No one will argue the border issue needs to be dealt with. It's been an issue for years. Go back to the debate on immigration between George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan in 1980. Their tone was much different then than now. What was agreed upon was that the system was broken, needs to be fixed. It's still broken, but boy, the Republican attitude toward immigrants sure has changed. I want to play that exchange back in 1980.
Yes, my name is David Grossberg, and I'd like to know, do you think the children of illegal aliens should be allowed to attend Texas public schools free, or do you think that their parents should pay for their education?
Who are you addressing that to?
I think you're first in this.
He was looking right at you. I said he was. Look, I'd like to see something done about the illegal alien problem that would be so sensitive and so understanding about labor needs and human needs that that problem wouldn't come up. But today, if those people are here, I would reluctantly say I think they would get whatever it is that they're, what the society is giving to their neighbors. But the problem has to be solved. The problem has to be solved because as we have kind of made illegal some kinds of labor that I'd like to see legal, we're doing two things. We're creating a whole society of really honorable, decent, family-loving people that are in violation of the law, and secondly, we're exacerbating relations with Mexico. The answer to your question is much more fundamental than whether they attend Houston schools, it seems to me. I don't want to see if they're living here, I don't want to see a whole thing of 6- and 8-year-old kids being made, one totally uneducated and made to feel that they're living with outside the law. Let's address ourselves to the fundamentals. These are good people, strong people. Part of my family is a Mexican.
Can I add to that? I think the time has come that the United States and our neighbors, particularly our neighbor to the south, should have a better understanding and a better relationship than we've ever had. And I think that we haven't been sensitive enough to our size and our power. They have a problem of 40 to 50% unemployment. Now, this cannot continue without the possibility arising with regard to that other country that we talked about, of Cuba and what it is stirring up, of the possibility of trouble below the border, and we could have a very hostile and strange neighbor on our border. Rather than making them or talking about putting up a fence, why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems, make it possible for them to come here legally with a work permit, and then while they're working and earning here, they pay taxes here. And when they want to go back, they can go back, and they can cross and open the border both ways by understanding their problems. This is the only safety valve right now they have with that unemployment that probably keeps the lid from blowing off down there. And I think we could have a fine relationship, and it would solve the problem you mentioned also.
Wait a minute. So
Wasn't that extraordinary?
They agreed. Reagan and the elder President Bush stressed the importance of treating immigrants, even those here illegally, with compassion and respect. Trump's harsh immigration rhetoric represents a dramatic break from other recent Republican presidents. And I don't know. That's recent history, Juan.
Isn't it extraordinary to listen to President H.W. Bush, then candidate Bush, and then actually Governor Bush. I'm sorry, Governor Reagan, or former Governor Reagan. But think of these two extraordinary men. Think of the tone. Think of the decorum
A
of the
debate.
presidency of the United States. Think of the humanity. After the time of this debate, you had the Supreme Court issue a decision called Plyler versus Doe, which is from where dreamers come from. And the thing becomes that there's a solution, actually, that doesn't even require something like the DREAM Act, that if we restore what was referred to prior to April 1st of 1997 called suspension of deportation, which is where someone can show that they would suffer extreme hardship, they've been in the U.S. X period of time, and that they are persons of good moral character. It would be such an easy solution to this problem, understanding that what they said is considered unacceptable now by this anti-immigration movement. Has anyone looked at where are the people from the Reagan era, from the H.W. Bush era, from the W. Bush era? Where are those leaders and experts who should be a part of any Republican administration because of their expertise, because of their abilities? I don't see them. And it worries me because where are the General Kellys and the General Mattises of this world to bring seasoned leadership to the debate? It's not working. Our system is not working, but mass movements, mass deportation is not what we do as a country. Children should not be afraid that their parents will be taken from them.
Well, they're at school.
Children should not be afraid that they will be targeted. And there are challenges. Since Plyler was decided, there has been an effort to try to get Plyler reversed. And Plyler basically stands for the principle that if documented children, I don't understand exactly why I'm even using the word documented children, that all children should have access to a basic education. We're that kind of country. We're a country that people look up to, not an isolationist country. The reason we can challenge other countries for leadership is because we are out there making a difference, not because we are turning our backs on the poor of the world, on the crises of the world, and making instigating fights with our friends and neighbors.
That was 45 years ago. That was under the Republican banner. And I know I'm going to be subject to vitriol. I know the email that I'm going to get. I also know that these questions need to be asked. I know that things need to get this kind of perspective. I know that there's a dogma out there. I know the problem needs to be fixed. I know that 45 years later, we still have not addressed the problem. I know that the way we're going about things, there's got to be a better way, Juan.
Well, compromise. That's what our history is. Think of every time we compromise, every time that we come up with a fair possible, when people come to a settlement, no one leaves the table ideally happy, but you compromise. You come up with something that everyone can live with. You don't demonize entire populations. I go back to think of the good people here who contribute to our country. think of the extraordinary minds that are coming and nurturing our country. And yet we're scaring them away. I mean,
the students who come here to get an education, yeah.
If you are a professor and you're afraid and you come, and what's the logic? Think of the professor, I believe it's from from the school in Tampa, who the Chinese professor.
Yeah, from Taiwan. Yeah.
I'm not even know his field, but the issue is, so someone in power does an extraordinary amount of business with China, but a lowly professor can't be paid by Florida. It's like, I don't understand the logic. I don't understand how we're thinking or what we're thinking.
About 2 minutes ago, you used the word leadership. There was an article, and I think it was in Forbes, but I'm not positive, and it said one of the big problems in this country these days is that we don't have true leadership. We have followers. The nation is truly lacking in leadership.
Oh no, we have lots of wonderful human beings, men, women, people of different backgrounds. But the thing is, though, that we as a country have to work and allow those individuals to have serious conversations rather than people. Our system of government is based on serious consideration by the citizenry and serious election of people who will, if you think of, for example, think of the Florida legislature. Florida legislature is supposed to go pass a budget and go home. I used to have a joke that we should amend the Florida Constitution to only allow CPAs to go and manage our financial affairs and then go home. And instead, we have all of this other stuff going on. And the answer is, I'm hoping that individuals will think of their duties and do what is right. We don't just have to follow sort of the chaos of the moment. We don't. It really isn't a football game. It isn't where you know how sort of like people will say crush the other side. No. This isn't a game. This is a very serious situation, and if we don't protect the rights of those who, even someone who is accused of committing a crime, if you look at 287G, one of the problems we have with 287G is that you need proper training, but there's talk of trying to sort of make it more, sort of like cut the training, if you will, into a lot less. And you need law enforcement to be properly trained. And then you have the other problem of, if I can transfer you to the immigration system and deport you before you're even given an opportunity to defend yourself in criminal court, then we have a problem, because we've just sort of dismantled our criminal justice system. Because if I can accuse a person of XYZ crime, and that person will not have an opportunity to confront witnesses, that will not have an opportunity for trial, or if they choose to defend themselves in trial, we're in trouble.
You know, I think we as a nation have lost the ability to have civil discourse. I remember John McCain was.
I'm more hopeful than that, because, I mean, don't you think that? I mean, there are individuals who refuse to, and we're more than that.
I don't want to lose hope. You know, I think of a town hall. John McCain was confronted by a woman in that town hall. I think you know where I'm going with this. And she
Yes,
said
absolutely.
something about Barack Obama and
Yes.
his roots. And he said, no, ma'am, no, you're wrong. And he refused to attack on that level. You know, if you want to talk politics, that's one thing. But when it gets personal, there's a whole nother story. You know, I'd like to think that all is not lost. And you know, sometimes I get lost in the headlines, and I wish people would go beyond that. I go back to when I was in school, and I had to take a debate course. And I was like, why? Why do you want me to take the other side and learn about the other side? And I know now why. Because they wanted me to understand that there is more than one side to a story. And you've got to research and understand so that, you know, when the time comes, you need to listen, you need to understand, and you need to know where people are coming from. But where I have problems is that people don't know how to listen anymore, Juan. Or they refuse to. I don't know which it is.
But it's our job, it's our duty. Think of the golden rule. Treat others as you would have them treat you. Sort of a summary of it. And the thing is, how is it that we have to address the frustrations? We have to address the issue of what I called watered down education. If you don't consider the complexities of history, if you don't consider the complexities of our life, if you just focus on the accusations by one group or another, we're not in a good position.
You're right.
But the thing is that it's what you mentioned about the debate. We have to think critically, not as in like criticizing, but objectively, logically. And the thing is that when something does not make sense, we have to be free to say this doesn't make sense without the fear of revenge, of retribution, whatever word you want to use. But we have to work on all sides to do this, but we cannot use the power of the state in just any which way that appointed and elected officials want to. We need to remember our system of checks and balances. We need to remember our system of limited government. Government is meant to serve us, the people, not the other way around. And we cannot have government by fiat. It is dangerous, and people in the House, people in the Senate need to sit down and work things out in ways that will make sense, and limit the excesses of the executive. And again, I used the example earlier of lawsuits against the Obama administration, against the Biden administration. Those same individuals should be typing away and challenging excess.
And on the note of not forgetting our history, I want to leave everybody with this thought, and I thank you so very much for your time. It's always fascinating to talk with you. I want all of us to ponder this. Have we as a nation lost sight of the fact that many of our parents and grandparents escaped from other countries and left everything behind because of tyranny and injustice, left looking for freedom and peace and a better life? Thank you for joining us on Politics and Power.
See why every day more people are choosing News4JAX, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.